This right here is the bike that many of you know as the Bolton 2020, and they've been out of stock for a while, but today they're going to go back online for pre-order. I wanted to make sure that this bike was worth the wait. Now, it would be nice if we could make the bike lighter, faster, more powerful, packed with more features, and not cost more money, but maybe we did. Make sure to hit that subscribe button. I have a massive list in my hand here, multiple pages, so that way I can remember everything that I'm going to tell you about this awesome new bike coming out. You're not going to want to miss this, so make sure to stay tuned. This is an older bike. Obviously, this is not the one that's coming because I said there were a bunch of changes. So because they're in production, I don't have one to show you yet, but I can tell you what the changes are going to be. I've got a few other bikes that are going to help me point out a few key differences on the new models. So it's about time that I tell you about my secret project that I like to codename Blackbird. I mentioned in a previous video that I was going to start using some aviation related names. And so for these bikes over here, I nicknamed them the Warthog after the A10 Warthog, a air-to-ground attack vehicle, and I just feel like those are a super awesome, tough ground attack vehicle. Now, for the Bolton 2020, some of the changes I wanted to make were to reduce the lead time. The last batch of bikes that came over shipped right before Chinese New Year, and that means there was a break in production as expected, but right when we expected things to go back to normal and people go back to work and we get our next batch of bikes rolling, that didn't happen. Nobody was working overseas, and it took months to get things back up and running, in which time we sold out of these bikes very, very fast. About 90% of the bikes that were sold last time were black. And even though I ordered more black bikes than usual, we still sold out of black the fastest. So to speed up lead time, speed up production, one of the things we can do is simplify our color choices. And so this batch is going to be a special production run, and every single one is going to be black. So I apologize if you were looking for one of those awesome, cool colors. They'll come back at some point in the future. So in aviation, the SR-71 Blackbird is a super fast, high altitude stealth aircraft. So I named this bike after the SR-71 Blackbird because it's all black, it's super powerful, even more so than before, and you probably didn't see it coming. Now, like before, there are going to be two sizes of the bike. There's going to be a smaller 24-inch model and then the larger 26-inch model. Just a heads up, demand is very high. The waiting list on these is already nearly 10 times greater than the number of bikes that are in production. So I expect these to sell out. The aluminum frame is going to remain, so we're going to keep the weight down. More on that in a moment. Now, the suspension fork. Previously, we had a rigid fork as standard, and a suspension fork was optional. Now, if I walk over to this bike, this is an old custom bike that I built for myself, but this is the style of fork that we have on there. It's a very nice air fork. It has lockout, adjustments in between, air adjustable. It's a quick release, 135 millimeter axle. It's been a great fork. So I had to decide, do I have an option and we possibly delay things a little bit, or do we simplify things yet again and we just make the fork standard? Now, if you ordered one of these bikes, there's a good chance in the previous batch that you bought one with a suspension fork or you had it added on after the fact. Almost everyone wanted it. So again, to speed up the lead time and make the bike better, we have decided to put the fork on as standard, so a rigid fork will no longer be an option. But there's one more surprise. This fork is great, I love it, we're still gonna sell it online. That's not the fork that we're going to include. We're actually upgrading the fork even more, and the reason I brought this bike out, this isn't exactly the same, but this is the style of fork that we're gonna have on the new bike. That one you can see is an inverted air fork. It's gonna be a bit more heavy duty even than this one. Air adjustable and everything, lockout of course. And the awesome thing about this new fork is that we're going away from quick release axles. So that means we're upgrading the hubs too. We're going to a through axle, which is a bigger, stronger design, and we're going to a 150 millimeter hub. This is a 135 millimeter hub, and because of that, the maximum tire size we can really put on one of these guys is about 4 inches. If you go up to a bigger tire, the clearance starts getting really tight. By going to a 150 millimeter hub, we can increase the clearance on the fork. So that means if you want to go to a bigger 4.7, 4.8 inch tire, you can. So bigger, better fork. Previously, we had a 750 watt Bafang hub motor, and that motor's been super reliable. So we're not going to change it. There are certain things that it makes sense to leave in place and not change. The motor controller has been upgraded slightly over the years. So it's a 25 amp controller. It's rather large. We've added additional MOSFETs in recent versions so it can handle more heat, more power. That's 750 watts nominal. Realistically, if you used the display to unlock the power, the bikes would ship out maxing out at 750 watts. But if you turned it up, they would peak at about 1200 watts. The new version of the bike is going to have even more power. So instead of 1200 watts peak, we're going to 1300 watts. So how did we get the extra 100 watts? This battery right here. Now the style is slightly different than the one on this particular bike, but this is a 52 volt battery. Previously, it was a 48 volt, 14 amp hour. Then we bumped it up to a 48 volt, 16 amp hour. Now we're bumping it up to a 52 volt, 16 amp hour. So the overall capacity is increasing to 830 watt hours, but by bumping the voltage up, we can get a little more power out and a little bit more speed. So to figure out how fast the new bikes are really gonna go, because the controller, the motor are the same, I've got a 52 volt battery on here. We can actually just go take it for a quick spin, and I can answer that question right now. Now this is the 24 inch size. It's a little bit small for me, but we're gonna take it for a spin nonetheless and see what happens. There's a little bit of a glare from an overcast day. All right, we're passing the camera. It's relatively flat. Okay, so I can take a look at the footage on the GoPro that's facing the display, but I think we were able to do about 28. How do we get that power to the motor? Currently, there's 2 ways to do that. You have a pedal assist and a throttle. So you have your thumb throttle right here on the right-hand side, and then you, of course, have a cadence sensor, a pedal assist sensor down near the bottom bracket that senses when you're pedaling. It doesn't know how hard you're pedaling, but it knows when you're pedaling, it kicks on the power, and you can adjust that with the 5 levels of assist. I'm hesitant to tell this because it almost just seems too good to be true, but the current plan is for this cadence sensor down here to go away. This part right down here, that's called the bottom bracket. The spindle here and the cartridge that's basically installed inside the frame. Now previously, there weren't many options for pedal assist sensors or torque sensors or anything that go in the bottom bracket for fat tire bikes, but now there are. So instead of the standard bottom bracket that I just showed you, this is going to have a bottom bracket with a torque sensor installed. So the cadence sensor is going away and a torque sensor is going to be installed, meaning that the bike's going to know how hard you're pedaling and can input more power based on how much you pedal. Now it's still going to be adjustable based on how much power, but I'm really looking forward to that. I know it's a thing many of you have been asking about, and this batch, we're going to make that happen. Now that you know we've got more power, how do you stop? Previously, we have these really nice Shimano hydraulic brakes, either the M355 or 365. We've sold on many different bikes. They've been popular, they work great, they're reliable, but that's not good enough. I always want more. How do we make this bike so good that you are willing to wait for the long delivery time that it's going to be? Now this is the bigger Warthog model. This is the 1500 watt mid-drive. No, we're not going with that motor, the belt, or anything like that. So these are 4-piston brakes. You have dual pistons on each side, so you've got more braking power. So on the Bolton Blackbird, we are going to put on these same 4-piston brakes front and rear. In addition, we're going to bump the rotor size up from 160 millimeters to 180. So bigger discs, better brakes. Increase the battery size, you've beefed up the fork, you've put bigger, better brakes on, bigger rotors. So far it's sounding awesome, but it's not sounding lighter. So how could you make this bike with all of these great features, faster, more powerful, and still lighter? Now that's where it comes to the rims. We've been using these rims, they're anodized, they're 100 millimeters wide. We use nice heavy duty spokes. They're sturdy, they're reliable. I like them. But this is something I wanted to try for a while. We are going to change the rims to a slightly narrower 80 millimeter, but remember that we've got a wider fork, so we can actually even go with a bigger tire if we want to. But they're going to be tubeless rims. So the bike as it comes is going to be tubeless ready. There are going to be tubes installed on the bike when it ships, just for simplicity of shipping and setup. But we're gonna have tubeless rims, tubeless tires, and you're going to have a tubeless kit shipped with the bike. So if you choose to remove the tubes and make the bike several pounds lighter, everything will be there to do that. Some of you might be wondering, what does tubeless really mean? What does that actually do? So let me explain a little bit about tubeless setups. So here's a standard bicycle tube. Every time your wheel rotates around, this tube squishes near the bottom and then expands again, and it's constantly squishing and expanding at every point along the tube where your tire is contacting the ground. That means there's a certain amount of friction that's happening right there. So in a tubeless setup, this is often used in mountain bike racing and things like that. One of the advantages is that you can get more speed, less rolling resistance, because you eliminate all of the friction of the tube. So it actually makes you faster. Now, how much faster will it make this bike if I remove the tubes and change it to tubeless? I don't know yet, but that will be an interesting topic for a future video. Now, another advantage is, one of the common flats you can get is what they call a pinch flat. You hit an obstacle or something really hard. Basically, you pinch the tire and it causes a flat. Well, if there's no tube, pinch flats are eliminated, meaning you could run at lower pressures, so that's better traction in sand and snow and off-road rough conditions. And in general, tubeless tires just are regarded as a better setup for preventing flats overall. Tubes will be installed on the bikes when they ship, but they will be tubeless ready. Very excited about that and very interested to see how that affects the performance speed-wise and range-wise. One of the common requests I had on the previous batch was, do you have fenders, and do you have a rear rack? Do you have a headlight? Do you have a tail light? You may not see them installed on this bike right now, but I'm happy to say that the next batch of bikes will come standard. Every single bike will have fenders, a rear rack, headlight, and tail light included. And finally, but probably one of the more important things for any e-bike, is comfort. So how do we make this bike more comfortable? And I've got two things. One of these was already included, but it's not on this bike, so I wanted to make sure you knew that it is something that's there. And this is an adjustable stem. This is your typical stem. That means there's no adjustment to these handlebars. They can't go up and down at all. This is an adjustable stem, which is standard on the Blackbird going forward. And this installs in the same spot. But as you can see, there's a big rise to it right now. That brings the handlebars up higher and closer, so you can get into a more comfortable upright position. If you want it down, you just loosen this bolt right here. You can twist this down wherever you'd like and tighten it back up. And I have one other surprise having to do not with the seat, but the seat post. Here's my green bike that I showed you earlier. Now, I would say this is pretty close to properly adjusted height-wise for me. So that way I get a proper leg extension when I'm pedaling. But as you can see, this would be a lot for my leg to swing over. It's kind of hard to get on and off. And I know for the average age and demographics of my customers, if there's a way to make it easier to get on the bike, that is a huge benefit. Now let me show you what would happen if I had the seat all the way down and I got on the bike. If I lower it to the point where it's easy to get on, and then I go to pedal, so my knees are scrunched up a little bit where it's not comfortable to pedal. That's not what we want. So how do we get on the bike with the seat in this position where I can almost put my feet on the ground, but then get it up into the higher position once I get on the bike? Well, we do that with what's called a seat dropper. So once I'm on the bike, there's a lever right here I can press, and up the seat comes to the right position for my height. Now, before I stop, if I want to, I can press that lever again. It goes back down with the weight of me sitting on the seat, and then I can easily stop like this. So on the Bolton Blackbird, every single seat post that comes on the bike is going to be that seat dropper style, so you can make it easier to get on the bike. Once you get on and start pedaling, you can lift the seat up into a more comfortable position, and then you can easily lower it back down before you stop again. I think this is something that's being missed in the marketplace, and I'm happy to be, as far as I know, one of the first to put a seat dropper on kind of a standard production fat electric bike. Now there's two things that I have not covered yet, and that's the lead time and the price, because lead time obviously has been a little bit difficult lately. If you've been watching the news, everyone is sold out of electric bikes. They're back ordered. It's getting a little bit crazy. So when are these bikes going to show up? Well, they're in production now, and I will have some production photos and things I can share with you in the near future so you can see the finalized version of the bike. What I'm showing you now is the previous version, along with, here's some of the parts and pieces that are going on it, and a lot of those parts and pieces are still coming in from different places. But we're shooting for August. Now I know that's a bit of a wait, but this is going to be totally worth it, and I hope you see that from this video. Now price, surely with all of those things added, the price has to go up from $19.99 where it was. And that's true, it should, but the previous price of the bike with just the suspension fork added was an extra $200 on top of that, so $21.99. And that's what we're gonna do for the pre-order. So it's $21.99 for the pre-order sales. You're still gonna get all of those things we talked about. Bigger battery, more range, more power, bigger, better fork, tubeless setup, seat dropper post, 4-piston brakes, goes down the entire list. The racks, the fenders, the lights, all of that's gonna be included at that $21.99 price. Eventually, if we can keep these in stock, the price will go up to $24.99. So it's gonna be a $2,500 bike in the long run, but that's assuming I have them in stock on the floor and you can just come get one. And right now you're not gonna be able to do that, and it's gonna be a little while before you can. So I hope that helps answer all of your questions about the new Blackbird. I know it may have raised some more, but we're gonna put out more videos, get more information. We're gonna get photos of the first production bikes out as soon as we possibly can. But if you want to pre-order one of these, go to boltonebikes.com. I'll make sure there's links in the description. Once again, make sure to hit that subscribe button, hit like, and leave a comment below, because I like to give stuff away to people who leave comments on my channel. I couldn't do any of this without you guys that are watching these videos. I appreciate you, and come back again next Thursday.